Hey y'all, what's going on? It's Professor Barth here. I'm recording out of my home tonight, so I don't have my usual camera and microphone. The audio video quality won't be so good, but that's all right. Big day. The 50th anniversary of the Nixon shock. Nixon's announcement that the U.S. dollar would no longer be backed by gold. This ended the Bretton Woods System, which had been put into place in 1944. Fixed exchange rates based upon a dollar backed by gold, albeit loosely, but backed by gold at $35 an ounce. And Nixon's decision to take us off the gold standard had huge ramifications that I don't think were quite appreciated at the time and are still not fully appreciated by the public. It was a turning point in U.S. economic history. I want to give you a few of my thoughts tonight. It's actually just the eve of August 15th. It's August 14th, but we're almost there at August 15th. So, I'll give you my thoughts. In short, I think it was a big mistake, and I'll explain why over the course of this brief video. But as we all know, following Nixon's announcement, which, by the way, was sold as a temporary measure, of course it wasn't, since 1971, August of 1971, the U.S. dollar is a purely fiat currency. But of course, in the 1970s, a lot of inflation. Inflation, in fact, reached double digits by 1979. That's a rate of inflation that none of us have experienced, at least yet. Okay, there's of course a lot of inflation fears right now with the current state of the U.S. dollar. I'll get to that in a moment. The only thing that prevented runaway inflation was, the Federal Reserve just sent interest rates through the roof at rates that we wouldn't be able to imagine today. The peak federal funds rate was 20% in the summer of 1981 under the chairmanship of Paul Volcker. Think of that, 20% federal funds rate. That means the prime rate, or ordinary Americans, is a bit higher than that. You're not getting a mortgage at that rate. Okay, at least you're not getting a mortgage cheaply. But so that stemmed the runaway inflation. But since then, we've had a steady decline in the U.S. dollar. Get this stat, since 1971, prices have risen sixfold in the United States. Sixfold. Now, if you had gone back in time in August, 50 years ago, August 15th, 1971, and told somebody that within the next 50 years, prices are going to increase sixfold, I think you would have had a lot more Americans questioning that decision by the president. But since the 1970s, and I explain this, by the way, if you're interested in this topic of the Nixon shock, I recorded about a 20-25 minute video last fall detailing that decision. I advise that you watch that. But since the 1970s, we have lived in an economy of easy money, deregulation of the financial industry, corporate cronyism in government and various federal agencies, a system that I've termed elsewhere, and it's another video I recommend you watch, a system of what I call unanchored capitalism. Unanchored capitalism. You see, capitalism under the gold standard was anchored by something solid, okay? Something solid, something that was external or extrinsic to the financial industry, to the banking industry. Gold is a commodity, is something that comes out of the ground. It was less prone to manipulation. Now, it was still, as I noted earlier in the video, the Bretton Woods System was very, very flawed. Gold was, I know, subject to much manipulation under that system and under some previous systems, but not as prone to manipulation as fiat currency, which just has no rules, no boundaries, and is issued by a central bank, the Federal Reserve, which is controlled literally by the banking system itself, by the financial industry. Okay, so there was an anchor there, gold, so it was a check on the system. And the reason why Nixon got the gold standard in 1971 is because in the 1960s, the federal government went way into debt to to go to war in Vietnam, one of the worst mistakes in our country's history, Vietnam War, and then the Great Society, which failed. It didn't succeed. The Great Society did not succeed in eradicating poverty, obviously. And so, but it was very expensive, as was the Vietnam War. And so this program, Guns and Butter, created these large deficits that were financed by cheap dollars, and that destroyed confidence in dollars. So Nixon, instead of seeing that, instead of operating as a check in that moment and reining in some of the spending and borrowing and money printing, Nixon just said, "Oh, no more gold standard," and they eliminated that anchor. So the anchor was taken away. So now there's just no anchor. It's just fiat, purely fiat currency. By the way, this is one of the reasons why I like Bitcoin, and because Bitcoin, like gold, there's a reason why people call Bitcoin the digital gold. Sometimes it's referred to. I like Ethereum too. But these cryptocurrencies are completely extrinsic to the banking system. They're not controlled by the big banks, not controlled by the financial industry. Yes, hedge funds get involved, just like finance got involved in gold in the past. So there are hedge funds who get involved in Bitcoin and all the rest. But Bitcoin itself is a commodity. It's separate from that. And so it's less subject to manipulation. Our system today is an unanchored fiat currency combined with corporate cronyism in government and federal agencies, where you have a revolving door. The greatest example of this is the Federal Reserve System, which isn't really a government agency, of course. The Federal Reserve, I've defined elsewhere. The Federal Reserve, essentially, if you want to know what the Federal Reserve is, Federal Reserve is a private banking syndicate or a private banking cartel that receives government sanction. Okay? Government sanctioned private banking syndicate, private banking cartels run by the big banks. That's just a fact. Okay? Now you might think that's a good thing, but that's the fact. Okay? So we have an unanchored fiat currency with corporate cronyism in government and federal agencies, with a central bank controlled by the financial industry, with this giant financial sector. Man, this is this system is so antithetical, need I even mention this, to a truly free enterprise system. To a truly free enterprise system. But nevertheless, despite that fact, despite it having really no relation to a truly free enterprise system, capitalism is smeared by this system, because people are like, well, this system's obviously crap. So, like, ergo, let's go socialism then, because this is capitalism, and we know this is bad, so let's go with the alternative. When in reality, it's this, I don't know, this Frankenstein creature that's been created by the big banks, primarily, but also by certain creatures on Wall Street, designed to augment their own profits in manipulative ways. And we've had booms and busts, the dot-com bubble, housing bubble. It's just been bad results. A bad result. Going off the gold standard. Who has benefited since 1971? The big banks. The big banks have consolidated their hold over the financial industry. You look at the numbers. Today, roughly two-thirds of banking assets are in the top 10 banks. And the top 5 banks have almost one-half of all banking assets. In 1971, it wasn't even close to that. The financial sector as a percentage of GDP has more than doubled since 1971. 1971, it was 4%. Today, it is 9%. The percentage of domestic corporate profits that belong to the financial industry has grown by leaps and bounds since 1971. Today, 30% of all domestic corporate profits are in the financial industry. In 1971, it was only 15%, so it's doubled. It's doubled. The financial industry's share in domestic corporate profits has doubled since 1971. Why? unanchored capitalism. This removal of gold as a check on capital, as a check on money creation, credit creation. By the way, manufacturing made up 40% of all domestic corporate profits in 1971. 40% in 1971, when the financial industry was only 15%. 40% went to manufacturing. And that was actually low because in 1950 it was 60%. Think of that. In 1950, 60% of all domestic corporate profits went to manufacturing. Today it's under 20%. Under 20%. So the banks, the financial industry has benefited. Who else? Wall Street's benefited. And I'm a market guy. You guys, you all know this. I'm a market guy. You've got markets are responsible for prosperity. You have to have enterprise. You have to have innovation. You have to have free, unbridled markets with some reasonable rules. Okay, but generally speaking, there should be an atmosphere of freedom in the marketplace. Nevertheless, Wall Street, or certain elements of Wall Street, also benefit from this. With the bubbles during the boom, you can make a lot of money, and some of these booms would not be possible in a system that was more anchored. Some of the big hedge funds, okay, etc. So certain elements, not all elements, but especially the big players on Wall Street. Well, who's lost since 1971? The working class and the middle class. Working class and the middle class. Wages, this is well known, wages do not rise at the same rate as inflation. Wages lag behind the price increase of other goods. Remember, a wage is a price. It's the price of labor. Wages lag behind. Wage increases, that is. They don't go at the same rate. And so working classes and middle classes, that the money they make from their wages or from their salaries does not correspond to the price increases. But since 1971, and I have these numbers in my video on unanchored capitalism, so you can check these out. I won't give you the exact numbers here, but you can look it up. Since 1971, the middle class in America has shrunk. And I think this system has contributed in considerable ways to that shrinkage. So where are we today? Well, inflation is in the news. The CPI, Consumer Price Index, which is flawed, okay? It's flawed, but we'll go by that measure. It's seen its largest increase this summer, largest increase since 2008. Over the last 12 months, 5.4% inflation, okay? I think that's going to go up this fall. All right, because look, the Fed, I mentioned Volcker, how he raised rates to 20% in 1981. The Fed has it's a fraction of 1%. It's not to even call it. It's basically zero. Okay, the Fed is keeping interest rates very, very low, in part because of the federal government's reckless spending with our hysterical reaction to coronavirus on one hand. I don't mean to go down a rabbit trail. That's my view of it. Our hysterical reaction to coronavirus on one hand, coupled with all this stimulus, which is essentially the introduction of UBI, Universal Basic Income. So all of this deficit spending, now this infrastructure bill, our national debt today is almost $30 trillion. $30 trillion. And yet we're spending money into oblivion. By the way, at $30 trillion, if you divide that up per taxpayer in the United States, that is $230,000 per taxpayer in the U.S. Think about that. $230,000 per taxpayer in the U.S. with this national debt at $30 trillion. So we're spending money into oblivion, and we're going to see a crisis in the dollar. If the dollar cannot survive these extremely low zero interest rates plus sky-high federal spending, it's just skyrocketing national debt. And so inflation's coming up, and we've all noticed it. The inflation is here, and it's not just gasoline. Food prices are going up. I was at Sprouts earlier today, and it's just an anecdotal anecdote, but this I like their sausage links. Okay, they're sausage links. I like them. They're good, a good, just easy lunch. It used to be $2.99. Like last summer, they were $2.99. Now it's $5.99. That's a double. That's a doubling in the price. It was $2.99. Now it's $5.99. Automobile prices, rent, housing. We all know that these are all soaring right now, all going up, and I think this will increase. Okay, this will increase. I remember when my first job was at Chick-fil-A, and it was 2000, the year 2000. I remember it was like a few months before 9/11, or like a year before 9/11. Yeah, it was in the year 2000, and I got paid $5.25 an hour. I thought that was pretty good. $5.25 an hour. I drove by Chick-fil-A last week, and they had a big sign and said, now hiring at $16 an hour. Okay? And I remember because I worked the cash register, so I knew all the prices by heart. And the number one Chick-fil-A combo, the chicken sandwich with the pickles and a large fry and a soda, large drink, after tax was $4.87. All right, now it's like more than $7, depending on where you live. Okay, but prices are going up. I think that's going to increase this fall. We'll just have to see, because I don't think there's any appetite in this federal government to decrease spending, and I don't think there's any appetite at the Federal Reserve to begin raising rates, because that would put the federal government in a real bind. Because the federal government, with all this deficit spending, requires low interest rates. So we're really in some pretty unparalleled times. So that here we are, 50 years later, after Nixon leaves the gold standard. If people back then could have seen what all this would amount to, $30 trillion of national debt, and all the inflation, and the shrinkage of the middle class, and the fall of American manufacturing and the American financial industry having more and more power over the U.S. economy, do you think the American people back then would have responded in the same way to Nixon's announcement? I suspect they would not have. But anyway, okay, those are my thoughts. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all again later. Bye.